Gwen Binsfeld. My background is education was in inclusive recreation and kinesiology 100 years ago, but most of the body parts are still the same, still working, so I think it's a little bit relevant. I've coached multiple para sports. I competed until 2009 in alpine. I've been head coach that ever since, and then managed all the development in Eastern Canada, from grassroots to Paralympics. About a dozen athletes have gone to the Paralympics in the last 10 years through our program. So today I brought in some old friends that are going to field all the questions. So the host is Rich, and there's so much to say about Rich. I'm actually going to use my cheat notes here. Rich used to ski with us and compete with us, but he's done lots of things. So Rich had a spinal cord injury, and he's been involved in parasports for 30 years. His true passion has always been sport, and his experience as an athlete, a coach, a mentor, and instructor for various adaptive sports across the province. Upon graduating as a recreation therapist, Rich worked at Lyndhurst Center for 5 years, creating opportunities for others to be introduced to sport through the cottage program and many community-based events. In 2013, he and his wife opened and began a new chapter at NeuroCore, their private physiotherapy and physical rehab clinic in Richmond Hill. Sharing that passion to keep people active, Rich and his team have introduced clients to hand cycling, adapted mountain biking, cross country and alpine skiing, and adapted rock climbing. I should also mention that somebody else from NeuroCore is here, hiding over there. Allie has been our strength conditioning coach with the para alpine team for a number of years. She's a great resource if you want to work out and find how to get the best out of your body. Go see that girl. And with the skills he's developed through his own participation in sport, he's now focused on sharing his passion with his 2 young daughters and looks forward to the day he can't keep up with them. At 52, very brave to put your age in there. I'm not doing that. At 52, he also knows he couldn't keep up with any of the panel speakers today, which is why he's honored to be the moderator for this elite group of crazy Canucks. So I will say that Katie Convoluzier will be trying. She's here. Yay.
Katie, you can unmute yourself and put your camera on. We'll be able to see you.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, Katie.
No problem.
I'm just gonna jump in here and manage a little bit, because now that we've got Katie, just in case she has to run away on us, if you want to start with her story first and go backwards or whatever, what do you want to do? What do you think, Katie? How available? Is there any chance you're gonna have to go to the emerge room or anything crazy like that?
No, I'm good. I'm clear for the afternoon.
Okay, then you can stay with the program as it is. The other complication, another one of our athletes hasn't made it. So all of his questions I'll be answering because I do know most of the answers for him. We'll just put his picture up and, I won't be a ventriloquist, but I'll try and answer the questions. Okay, take it away, Rich.
All right, thank
Oh, wait, you know what? Just one more thing. There's a short video. I do this all the time. It's just a 1-minute video. It shows all the different ways. Some of the people that are in the room are in that. I'm gonna go away.
Good.
I dance around, you know that.
No, she's larger.
So if any of you want to see this video again, it's on the Parasport website. If you click on alpine skiing, it's there with more information.
I came from the mud, there's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. Catch catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon.
Go for it. Awesome.
All right. So thank you everyone for coming to this session. We have just an hour or a little less than an hour now to chat with some pretty elite athletes. You know, the emphasis is kind of on alpine skiing, but really the idea of developing the athletes and the skills and the pathways to make that happen is kind of across the board. You know, I've been fortunate to do some alpine skiing, but I've had experience with rowing and with tennis. And it's the same barriers, same frustration. And it really comes down to the individual and their own unique experiences. You know, whether it's an acquired or congenital disability, their family, their support, their friendships, and the resources around them that really make that happen. So I think just to get started, it'd be great for you guys to hear their own personal stories first, from introduction to sport, and just kind of what they've achieved in that sport. And we can go directly to questions. I don't know if we actually want to ask the audience first, is there an area that you guys have questions in that you really want the athletes to kind of touch on as we're going through the session? Or is it just kind of you're here to open and hear their stories and just get a general understanding? That one? Yeah. If there are questions, this is completely irrelevant to high athletic performance. But I had these in my bathroom for a long time that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to turn them into gifts for the audience that you can re-gift if it's not appropriate for you. It's a Green Buds and Hash parody book of Dr. Seuss about medicinal marijuana. But it's really, really, really funny. And it's so well done.
I knew it was dangerous bringing you.
Three of them. So the top three questions, I'm going to empower you here. You're going to want this.
But just want to throw it out there that Rich raced before that drug test.
And it was an interesting group that I raced with back 20.
Yeah, 5 drunks and a coach.
I was the young guy on the team. They were all in their 40s. I think I was 22.
Fun.
So, Katie, do you want to start with your story first in case we do lose that connection? You're still there. I can't see you.
Already.
Hello?
Are you still? Yeah. Okay,
I'm
great.
still here. Yeah.
So, we'll let Katie tell her story first, and hopefully we can get your camera as well so people can see.
While we're getting Katie up, we've put long, hard road and fast track. So we've got athletes that were congenitals and have been at this for well over a decade to get where they are. And we have ones that drank from the fire hose, and Katie's one of those.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie. I'm from Toronto. I grew up skiing my whole life in Collingwood, Ontario. So I come from a family of skiers, and I competed in alpine ski racing up until the end of high school. And after that, I transitioned more towards a coaching role. I was injured in 2018. I suffered a spinal cord injury from a skiing accident. And it was really natural for me to go back into ski racing after that. I kind of viewed my injury as an opportunity to kind of pursue that racing career that I'd always wanted to do as an able-bodied athlete. And now as a para, I was given a new opportunity to pursue that. So I started sit skiing in 2018, a couple months after my accident. Rich was there on my first session, and Gwen was holding the tethers, so teaching me how to ski. And I progressed really rapidly, and I knew from the get-go that it was something I wanted to pursue seriously and compete at an international level. So I was very eager to make those connections, emailing the national team coaches and trying to get as much training as possible in those early days. At the time, I was also a medical student studying in Ireland, so I didn't have a lot of access to snow, so I made every opportunity I could to come back to Canada and get some time on snow and really get used to sit skiing. So then in 2020, right in the middle of pandemic, I realized that the ski hills in Ontario were going to be closed. So I kind of made the jump to head out west to Rocky Mountain Adaptive Program and got some really good training in there in the 2021 season. And then the following year, I was invited to come on some national team camps, and from there I competed at my first World Cups and got some podiums and just kept going, and then competed at the World Championships in the same year, a couple more podiums there, and that qualified me for the 2022 games in Beijing. So I headed to my first Paralympics after learning to sit ski less than 4 years previously. So it was the fast track, as pretty much as fast as you can go. It was it's a lot of work, but I'm still still learning, still progressing. I have a long way to go until I can be a serious competitor internationally, but I enjoyed every step of the way. But yeah, it's been a total whirlwind experience, but I've had a lot of great support from coaches and staff along the way, being really, really accommodating to me to pursue my studies as well as compete in this really accelerated program. So I'm joining you today from my place of work in Gatineau. I'm currently a family medicine resident, so still on the multitasking program, trying to compete and train, and I'm heading off Friday to first ski camp of the season. So that's a little bit of my story. Yeah, we'll ask some more questions later.
For sure. Thank you, Katie. So what's kind of cool about this panel is everybody on this panel was a skier actually before they got into the ski racing as well, which is kind of unique. Mac, do you want to tell kind of people your story?
For sure. Hey guys, I'm Mac Marcoux. I have been on the Canadian Paralpine ski team since 2012, 2013 season, and I'm just kind of wrapping up a career in high performance sport, kind of as we speak in the next couple of weeks. But I guess things all started when I was 8 years old. I was diagnosed with Stargardt's disease, which basically has taken all my central vision, left me with 6% in the peripheral. I grew up in a pretty motorsport oriented family growing up. We were about 50K north of Sault Ste. Marie. So all the sports that we were taking part in involved a motor, from dirt bikes to snowmobiles to racing go-karts, and pretty much anything my parents could get us into to make sure we didn't have to commute back and forth to town to play hockey or soccer. And when I was diagnosed, my family started looking into sports that were available for visually impaired athletes, and eventually stumbling across ski racing. Ski racing had the most parallels to kind of how we were raised. It's fun, it's fast, and there was a lot of opportunity for growth. So we basically kind of jumped in with 2 feet up in Northern Ontario, with guidance from Gwen and a little bit of conversation with the national team, just trying to figure out how to get involved, especially in a space where there wasn't really an adaptive community. So I jumped in racing able-bodied in Northern Ontario for my first 4 or 5 years, kind of building fundamentals and really learning the sport of ski racing before making the jump over to the para side in 2011, where I guess I kind of met everybody. I jumped in on Canadian Nationals in 2011. Will was there, and Gwen pretty much took me under her wing with my brother as my guide, and
That's him in that little orange helmet at the back.
Yeah.
Name.
yeah,
And there's him with his brother.
I was a wee lad at that time. I showed up the first race. I was probably 13. I think I was 8th grade, and things progressed really quickly. And about 3 weeks after nationals, I guess we'd found a little bit of success at nationals and ended up being able to stand on the podium a couple times, which was not what we expected. We kind of gone out there just to see where we'd stack up against the rest of the para community, because at that point we hadn't really been around anybody. So about 3 weeks later, I jumped over to my first development camp with the national team, and spent the whole next season racing kind of around North America on the NORAM circuit, just kind of learning my new surroundings and trying to get my bearings in a whole different atmosphere within ski racing. And rolling into 2012-13 season, we kind of jumped on the World Cup program as a trip by trip basis, just to see where we stack up against a little bit bigger field and a little bit higher intensity setting. And we ended up racing the majority of that World Cup season, finishing with, I think, 4 or 5 podiums throughout the year, and then silver at World Championships, which just kind of snowballed into that 2013-14 Paralympic season. And my brother and I were named to the team and headed to Sochi, which wasn't really what we expected. It was always a goal, but we thought it'd be a little longer track. And from there, it's just been the last, I guess, 8 or 9 years of just kind of feels like it happened really quickly. But we had the opportunity. My brother retired right after Sochi, and I worked with a couple guides since then. And I've had the opportunity to compete in Pyeongchang and most recently Beijing. And now we're wrapping things up because ski racing's pretty hard on the body. So that's my spiel, I guess. Now kind of making the transition from competing in a high performance setting to trying to, I guess, venture down different avenues of parasport that don't really fall under the Paralympic umbrella. So spending a lot more time in the backcountry in BC trying to facilitate a program where we can eventually take disabled athletes into the backcountry and let them experience a different avenue of skiing that isn't as easily attainable. So thanks for having me.
Will, you're the last man in the
All
room.
right, my name's William Gouchard. I have been skiing for probably 20 years now, a little bit over that. I started in a recreational program with Gwen I don't know how it started, but my parents around the age of 8 to 10 got me into a program called Track 3 here in Ontario. For some people outside of Ontario, I don't know if anyone here, but CADS does that in other provinces, but Track 3 will focus in Ontario only. It focuses on under 18 recreational skiing, so like learn to ski program. So that's how I kind of was introduced to skiing. My family was not as gung-ho as Mac's family, so skiing and speed and all those things were not first nature to me necessarily. I was kind of shy and a little bit timid, and I think maybe I might be an example of like someone who probably wouldn't have been a high performance athlete had I not been born with one leg. I've always been an amputee, congenital. So I just think, anyway, I'm not sure that maybe I would have been the typical like rah, getting your head in the game kind of athlete, but skiing, I was pretty good at it. And I progressed kind of quickly to about 12 or so, maybe 13 or 14. And Gwen kind of said, I think that you should start racing. And it was a bit of a slow transition because between learning to ski and the Ontario provincial ski team, there's really no in between, which for able-bodied, you have like, U8, U9, 10, all these different Nancy Green learn to race programs, and there was really no learn to race program. So it felt I can kind of relate a little bit to Rich when he was like a young guy on an older team, and things were just a little bit wild. There was I wouldn't say no rules, but it was, if you were to put a bunch of, under 18 kids on a team now, it would be a lot stricter. So, we're exposed to the world. It was an experience for sure. And then around 16 or 17, the Canadian National Ski, I was going to Canadian Championships, and the Canadian team recognized me a little bit, and I skied on the development team for a little bit. Went to the World Cup finals in 2011 or 2012 in Panorama. It was a great experience, and my high performance career was maybe shorter lived than some of the other people here. I spent a lot of time on the Ontario provincial team. I really did enjoy it, and I always tried, I guess, or I always trying to make the next level or what that was. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure always, like if I was goal oriented or not, or if I was just kind of like kicking and having a good time. But yeah, I think that, and then so to continue my story after skiing. So I think, I can't remember what our last year together was, but it was about 5 or 6, no more than that now, 20. Anyway, I finished up with some skiing, and then so para and I guess the para community has always been really close to me. And I've always been close to it. So it brought me into my now profession, which is prosthetics and orthotics. So I focus at work really heavily now. I stay close to parasport with the young kids coming through now who want to be athletes, and we help make them adaptive devices if they need it. Whether it's a sports leg or a recreational leg, to help them achieve and meet their goals. So that's really exciting, and I really love doing that in my everyday life. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now after skiing for quite some time.
Yeah, I'm surprised you forget that transition period, because you were at national championships in Kimberley, and you had an opportunity, a call came in from Edmonton to see if you could take a job at the thing you'd been trained in college to do, and you had to make a decision. You're gonna spend the time skiing, or you're gonna go look after your career. So
Yeah.
that was the big, and this was before we were all doing Zoom, and he thought, well, I can just do the interview over the phone. I'm like, get in the car, drive to Edmonton. Like, do you want this job or not? So
Yeah, it was
that
a
was
good
a
move. And
pivotal year.
Yeah, and now I I don't know, I was kind of, when I was writing my bio for this session, it was sort of like, what do I want to focus on? And I think that like after sport, life balance is important. And I think like that's sort of what I gravitate towards now when I talk about it, is like, it's a lot of fun and you can learn a lot of things, and you'll become a bigger and better and stronger person because of it. All of it, the teamwork, the camaraderie, learning to deal with people that you don't want to deal with sometimes, because you're always with these people. And there's really nothing quite like that except for, I guess, work sometimes. But it's a hard decision, and to leave that stuff behind and to kind of like become an adult. So that's kind of where I'm at these days. Is it was like, yeah.
Yeah, you both commented on the social. I know that was a big part for me as well. And that kind of led to the progression, because truthfully, the only place I could ski with other skiers in a sit ski was if I was going to race. It's the only time that everybody kind of got together kind of in the province, where I could see how these guys were controlling their sit skis, what they were using for the strapping in their sit skis, to get an idea of what I would have to do to develop if I wanted to get to the next level. So it's that social connection in the community that has so much value as well, to live and to learn.
So this just shows you the difference between, 12 years working at as a congenital with the stand-up skier there. And then the sit skier, much like Katie, he was the year before, he's still on the national team. He too had an accident, and within 3 years was up there and continues to be, is still racing now. So the other athlete, I'm just gonna talk about this feeder system. So track 3 is what Will came through. And the CADS program, we developed a coordinated effort between track 3 and CADS Ontario and CADS NCD to have a learn to race, because they've mentioned how we have this big gap. We continue to struggle with that gap. Alpine Ontario is officially our PSO. And as you've heard, it's at this level, but it's quite separated from the CADS. And then there's people like Rich that just grab people, teach them how to sit ski, and then say, oh, by the way, Gwen, I think this guy would go on the provincial team. And away we go. And he brought somebody out to national championships. Like, really? We're just gonna sign a check and do the paperwork and he's gonna be on the team? Okay, thank you. Thank you for another athlete. So he's still doing some of that for us, and we're happy. But the athlete that isn't here today is the one I'm trying to get to here. Sorry, I don't know why this isn't working with my fingers as well. That was Will, obviously, as a little kid. So James isn't here, like I said, and I'll pretend I'm James and I'll tell you his story. He lost his leg at 15, 2 years ago, was an accident, in family property. He was running around on a side by side, and we're just amazed that Max still has all his other body parts because he continues to do stuff like this and.
Some don't work good, but they're here.
So he was a skier before, but never a racer. And I mean, Katie called me from Lyndhurst when she just had her accident. Some of them are just so keen to get up and moving. And James was another one like Katie. And he found my name and my number and said I wanted to be a ski racer. And I thought, well, that's nice. You know, I want to go to the NHL, but I don't know how to skate. You know, it's kind of a big leap. And anyway, he worked at getting a ski leg. And so this is really new. The equipment is always developing. So he got a ski leg that you can see. There's articulation in the ankle, which we've had other skiers before that have skied on a ski leg, but it's never had that. Now, this is great in the tech events. Chances are Super G and Phil, he might have to be on one ski because I don't think it's going to be able to take it. So anyway, he came out in January last year and took to it like a duck to water. You would think he'd done gates his whole life. And he came to an entry-level race, Ontario Para-Winter Games. For any of you who haven't been to the Para-Winter Games, for our sport, it is such a highlight. It's the only entry-level race we have. And it only comes up about every 2 years. Sometimes it's 4, depending on what's going on. But it's critical for our pathway to have somewhere where you get to race against everybody else with the similar or different abilities. You get a factor and you think, oh, this is a real thing. So he was good enough that the next week, and I have to say this never happens, that we get, 3 big races in a month. But it was because they'd all been canned through COVID. So we had Ontario Para-Winter Games. The next week or two, we were off to Calabogie and had an integrated games with U16. So, he was with his peers right away and he got to ski as para. He did well enough at that. I was very optimistic from the beginning, so I put his name in for Canada Games. And Canada Games was 2 weeks later. And again, with the U16s, this kid had skied for 2 months. And he finished middle of the pack against the able-bodied who'd been training and coached for a decade. So obviously, just like Katie, and he was a little bit this way too. As soon as the national team gets a hold of the para-alpine, like they're just panting because they need more athletes. It's not a huge pool. So if they've got any potential at all, they go very quickly. So this kid who had never raced was in Saas-Fee training last week, which may be why he's not here. I'm not sure. Anyway, he's pressed pause on his education because he's just at the right age to do it. He's just finished grade 12. He wants to go into EMS. He's got a career path and a plan. But he aims to go to the next Paralympics. And just like Katie and some of the others, the ones that actually have a goal and then map out the years and meet with the national team coaches and the provincial coaches to figure out how they can get where they want to go, it's really important to do that early on. And if they never want to race after they do where we call the Learn to Race program for a couple of years, if they never race, if they become a skier for life, that's a big win. They can be out with their friends and doing it. And we're losing a lot of sit skiers because it's so much fun to go play para hockey. So there are other people out there, and then we have other ones that transfer, as we talked about in the last session. Ryan has been a good partner for summer, winter sports for us. And we've had athletes that have done both and ones that have sat down and said, yes, I want to go to Summer Olympics first, and then I'll do winter. And they're doing it because they can. And that's enough about James. And I'll leave you be.
So looking at, I guess, looking at competition and getting into the competition, then I'm just curious if you guys want to share what it was about the competition that kept you in the sport. Which, Gwen was talking about, it's hard to get the athletes and it's hard to keep athletes. I know you guys have been interested in other sports as well. So what was it about the skiing and your involvement in the skiing that kept you with this particular sport?
Nothing. No, I was very hesitant about I love to train and I love to ski and I love to be really cool in the gates and go crash them down and all that. But when it came to race time, I was not too happy. I was very nervous and I don't know if I always showed it, but I definitely, competition scared me. And it was the other people around me that kept me in skiing in a good way. Like, I don't think it was necessarily a negative thing. But I was always really kind of overly, maybe nervous and yeah, I would say there wasn't, yeah, it's a weird answer. I apologize. Not nothing, but, doing well, I guess, kept me in it. I performed really well at a young age, especially up against one of my friends, James, who I looked up to a lot. And we both had a really good pairing and we both he kept me in it for sure, I would say.
Yeah. On my end, it was the opportunity for progression. It was really something that made me very enthusiastic about staying involved in sport. I think, realistically, being somebody with a visual impairment, a lot of people want to put reins on you and slow you down a little bit because stuff's getting progressively sketchier. And it's totally understandable, but ski racing was kind of one of the avenues in my life that I think if any of you know Josh Duick, who's a past teammate of mine, puts it really well. Ski racing is kind of this place where there's a fence run, and all of the safety regulations are put in place, but it's kind of an opportunity to go as fast as you want and push yourself as hard as you can with very little restraint. So for me, it was just an opportunity to go in and go fast. And I'd looked up to national team athletes my whole career, both able-bodied and para, and was kind of obsessed with the sport for a long time. And the idea that I could race able-bodied in Northern Ontario and then make the jump over to para and now get to meet all these people that I had watched videos of. And at that time, videos were pretty scarce. It was a couple YouTube videos that were pretty shaky. And other than that, you were just going on people's word that there was this whole world. And, getting to, interact with the national team when I was in Kimberley in 2011. And then the opportunity to go and train with them. I had all these athletes that I'd looked up to, but also had goals and aspirations to get to that Paralympic Games. And it just seemed like the most perfect avenue of sport that I could, almost mimic what my idols in the sport were doing and then tweak it to my liking and see how things stacked up. And I think over, the course of the first couple of years, it was almost just the opportunity to prove myself over and over again and, make that jump from Northern Ontario to racing in para sport and then racing around North America and then the opportunity to go to World Cups and World Championships and, ultimately the Paralympics. It was just the consistent opportunity for progression that really kept me invested and has kept me invested for the last, now rolling on 12, 13 years.
I think skiing is unique in the sense that there's probably more risk in this sport than any other sport for injury and death. Really, especially when you're talking about the speed sports, Super G and downhill, and the way they're setting the courses now. It's the same as the women's fists for able-bodied skiers. You're going over 100 kilometers an hour on these courses. And you add a disability into that, it just increases the risk that much more. Do you guys think that, and Katie too, Katie jumped through so quickly to the high level of going that fast down an icy mountain. Do you think you were prepared enough through the progression that when you got to the different levels of racing that you're in the starting gate and you're like, okay, let's eat this up? Or do you feel like you were pushed through so quickly that that maybe, you should have taken more time?
Yeah, I guess in a way you can never be prepared for that feeling that you're gonna have in the start gate of your first downhill. For me, the lack of experience was definitely challenging coming into racing, but there's nothing that mimics that race environment other than actually racing. So regardless of how many Super G runs, how many training runs I'd done, nothing was going to adequately prepare me for that moment. I just needed to do it. So in a way, getting to that point where I was in the racing environment sooner better prepared me for the future, because I knew I had done these races before and I was able to do them again. You can train all day, but it's not going to give you that same feeling as being in an actual race start gate. So I think the sooner you can get to a race, the better.
Yeah, and if I could, I guess, piggyback on that for, I guess, context, Katie had jumped onto the scene and had become a teammate of mine within the time that I was recovering from one injury. Her pathway to, getting into the start gate in events, especially like downhill, and if anybody had watched the last Paralympics, you could see that might have been the spiciest track that I've ever competed on in my, at this point, pretty long career. So like having someone like Katie jump into an event like that with apprehension is very fair, because I have been able to stand on top of the podium in downhill from 2014 right through to 2022, and I stood in the start gate and still kind of shit my pants a little bit. That makes anybody feel better. So it's definitely, Katie put it really well. It's one of those things that you're never really ready for, but the more times you can put yourself in that scenario throughout the pathway of building blocks. For me, the integration in the able-bodied community was what allowed me to seamlessly transition into the power world, because I was racing consistently throughout the winters as a young athlete, from that 8 to 12 mark, where it was literally just learning how to race and learning how to try and figure out how to manage yourself in a race environment separate from a training environment. And then, that development, working the steps into the NORAM circuit and then eventually to World Cups. I think every time I was put in that new scenario, I was very overwhelmed, nervous, scared, stoked. But at the same point, it was definitely a new experience, and it was one of those things that you can't replicate. So the idea, like race to train and train to race, is really great, but it's really hard to actually, I guess, put on all the internal and external pressures that the race environment brings without putting yourself in that race environment as many times as you can before the big show.
And I think the disadvantage we have in Ontario as Ontario athletes too is we're super, super great at the technical, slalom and GS, because we spend a lot of time, on the short hills doing these tight turns. And then when you get up to the higher level and national level and you're doing the speed elements, there's a lot of new factors. The course, the wind.
It was a huge leap to go from on skiing on one leg in small Ontario hills to then having to ski for 2.5 straight minutes on a BC hill. You're like, I can't do this. My leg's on fire. And it was eye opening to kind of go to the nationals and and see what all these guys on one leg are doing. And you're like, I have to pick it up a little bit. This Ontario leg's not going to do.
So I think where we live, it's not so much a barrier, but it makes you one more thing to work through as an athlete. But are there any other barriers that you can identify? Talk about the work-life balance and just having the time or having the resources. I know for me, it was trying to balance. At that time I signed up for school and transporting across the province at that time, because we went to different resorts every weekend. We were at a different resort to try and piggyback off the able-bodied courses and wherever we could find gates set up for us to train on. That's certainly gotten better, I think, over the last 30 years. But other barriers that you can want to share with people that you've come across?
For sure. I think for for anyone that has spent any time around ski racing, it isn't the cheapest sport to get involved in. So like the financial barrier is massive. I was, not raised in a family that had a lot of means financially to just be like, here, I can put a whole bunch of money into ski racing. Like my parents, I owe so much to being like, I'm pretty sure they took a second mortgage out on their house just to put us through the grassroots level of ski racing and try and, give us the opportunity just to make it. So like the financial barrier is massive, but I think as time has gone on, there's a lot more programs put in place to aid financially in the development. Because it's one of those things that sometimes it's just not attainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. The financial barrier is the biggest barrier, I'd say, for parasport, and especially when you're coming in as like myself as a sit skier, it requires all the additional equipment that a stand-up skier might not need. For me, the sit ski being the major thing that I needed if I wanted to progress in the sport. I was really fortunate to be able to get grants from other organizations. There's a ton out there. If you just look, you can see in the picture there, I'm holding the High Fives grant. So I was fortunate to have my whole sit ski paid for by the High Fives organization. But I've also received a ton of different grants throughout my short career so far, and continuing to apply for more. So you really just have to kind of go out there and find those finances wherever you can. And then the other obvious barrier for a lot of people, especially adults coming into the sport of like para sports, because a lot of us have acquired injuries. We might already have careers or be in school. I was also fortunate to come into a time where there was a lot of more adaptability with the coaches, the staff, the team. They were all willing to let me pursue my education. I know that might not always be an opportunity depending on the team you're joining or the sport, if there is that flexibility there, but you really just have to ask and find ways to adapt, use all the time available to you, and then working hard to make everything work out. So yeah, finances and the time commitment that it requires to be a high performance athlete are some of the really big barriers, but with a little bit of ingenuity and flexibility, you can find ways around those barriers.
Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes left. Will, do you want to say anything on that, or it's all the same?
Other than the financial burden of all of it, and like now that I make adaptive equipment and understand why it's so expensive, I mean, I can't help that, but there's just so few people that are purchasing these adaptive pieces, and all of this medical research for it to be legally allowed to be sold has to be done the same way that you'd be doing a pacemaker, which is used in hundreds of thousands of people. So I don't know the answer to that solution, but that's kind of like where I see it. Like my leg costs $125,000 plus. So it's like, that doesn't even cover the ankle, it doesn't even cover the socket. That's just from here to here. And then that's not clinical time. That's not my technical time. Like, and that's what I walk around on every day. And that's what and that's not even the standard in Canada. That's above the standard. And it should be this is the standard. Is like a leg that it does not function like my other one. It doesn't even come close. So financial burdens are hard. And I understand, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, why the cost of these pieces are so high. Like we talk about thousands, like above $3,000 to $6,000 for sit skis and above. And like some of the pieces I look at and I'm like, that's a mountain bike shop. That's $200 on a mountain bike. But then you put it all together and it is now kind of it's a medical assistive device still, even though it's your high level athlete and all that, like that's your safety still needs to be taken into consideration. So it's hard. Yeah, I don't know what the solution is for that, but it's very expensive. It's very expensive. I shout out to Quest for Gold when I was an athlete because I got a lot of funding through them, and that was like huge for me.
One of the pieces that I like to make sure everybody's aware of is that the Jumpstart ends at 18 for the able-bodied, but it goes to 25 for the paras. So I always encourage people to get on that as soon as they can, because that gravy train stops.
Any questions that you guys want to ask the athletes that are here? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thank you all 5 plus James, 6 of you for your time. You know, we see you guys on TV racing, so I kind of feel like I'm meeting celebrities today. So that's really cool to have you here. So I teach about adapted sports. I teach about the Paralympics. And the motto of the Paralympics is to inspire and ignite the world. In my lecture, I get students to read an article that has 2 viewpoints, all from Paralympic athletes. One is, we really resonate with this model. We take on this extra responsibility. This adds to our burden, you know, in the sport. And then another perspective is, we don't want that. We're just an athlete, just racing down the hill as fast as we possibly can. It doesn't matter if you're on a sit ski or have one leg. And I'm just wondering, where does that land with you? You know, do you embody that, the message of the Paralympics, which is to inspire and ignite the world? Or do you just see yourself as a high performance athlete?
I think we're calling it the I word.
I do. I was just gonna say that.
Someone said
There-
something.
I want to say, like,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, there was like an ick around
Yeah.
the word inspiration, but I think at the end of the day, you're trying to compete at the highest level you can. That's the goal, and the byproduct of that is inspiration a little bit, and that's understandable and totally, you know, something that you're working towards. And I think as I get older, I see why it's used and why it's such a big part. It's more so the structuring around how it's portrayed in the world.
Right.
I think, you know, para sport for a long time, and it's definitely progressing and turning into, you know, something that a lot more people are interested in, because it, you know, the range of sports is gnarly in its own right. And they're showcasing that side of things a lot more than, you know, let's say even 5-10 years ago, when, you know, the whole, I guess, portrayal around Paralympics was like, look at these people, they're
Right.
getting up in the morning,
Right.
they're going outside,
Right.
and look at their skiing. And I think that rubbed people the wrong way a lot, especially, I think if you talk to a lot of athletes that are a little bit older and have been around for a hot second, that isn't who they wanted to be. They weren't rolling in to try and be that person that is just the sunshine to everyone's day because they got out of bed.
Right.
They wanted the recognition for the amount of hard work they put in, and to show all the things that happen behind the scenes, you know, like to be competitive in a high performance world. Like, it's not as much just committing a couple camps a winter to, you know, trying to become a fast ski racer. It's a full-time job between running dryland full-time in the winter, summertime. We're relocated to Whistler. We leave our families, a lot of sacrifice that goes into sport. And I think if it can be portrayed as, you know, very similar to the able-bodied world, where there is a lot of sacrifice and a lot of grit that goes into becoming a high performance athlete, and it's definitely getting there. But I understand the fact that it is inspirational. And for me, even like cruising around a para race every now and then, I'm like, shit, all right, game on.
Yeah.
Like it really lights a fire inside a little bit, because you see people dealing with so much adversity, and they're still just so stoked on not as much just the environment, but like the opportunity to really push themselves in that high performance world. That's where I sit anyway.
It's definitely something to bring up to the younger athletes and
Yeah.
teach them that they have to think of their own way around that.
Right.
Because you're gonna have a lot of people that, like, even when you're just recreationally skiing, they're gonna kind of like, you know, especially if you're visual, like if you look like a para athlete, you're gonna have like, I can't go a day without skiing without somebody asking me or telling me that that's really great, or it's really good that, you know, like something like that. Sometimes it sounds a little bit like, yeah, you're getting out of bed in the morning, good for you. But sometimes people are a little bit more aware of how they're wording that, but it still is like a, you know, yeah, you definitely have to think about how you want to interact with that scenario, and to, you know, and it's okay however you deal with it. Like, to just say, I'm just doing what everyone else is doing, is cool. And then you have people who really want to like get in there. And like, I've had people who want me specifically to like help motivate one of their family members because they're, you know, they lost their leg. And that's where it gets a little bit emotional, because like, especially the job that I do, I want to help everybody. I want to put a leg on all, you know, I want everybody to be involved in the sports they want to, but like, especially as an athlete, spending all your time on the hill, like zero time for that. And it kind of comes down to all of these pathways that we're talking about, like over these 2 days of like, of that is where you kind of push, if they want to know, it's where you push those people. It's like, or this is where you can go learn more. If you're really gonna ask me in the lift line about it or wherever, right? Yeah, just understanding how to interact with those people is important and to not feel bad about it.
Yeah, I also agree that, I mean, the Paralympic movement of us being, put up on a pedestal as we're the inspiration, it's gonna happen by default. The Paralympics is one of the only opportunities that regular people have to see these incredible disabled athletes competing at the highest level. So if that inspires people to get up off the couch, I'm all for it, but that's not our goal. The real goal is to kind of make people rethink how they think about disability. So if we can start it from people who have congenital disabilities and really just provide that positive example of what we are capable of, I'm totally happy to be called inspiring in that sense, if it means that I can inspire other young athletes with disabilities to pursue their dreams. But yes, it's para skiing, para sport is high performance in itself, and I think that we should be respected as high performance athletes in our own respect.
Very much.
Questions in the room? A couple minutes left.
What would you all say to your younger self before you were high performance athletes?
I'd go first for sure. I think, when I look at myself at 8 years old, being diagnosed with my disease, and there's two sides to that story. My parents really looked into what was available for visually impaired athletes, which was incredible. Propelled me into an absolutely amazing career on the para-alpine circuit, and I've had the most fun, made tons of friends, and had the opportunity to push myself over the last 12 years in ways that likely wouldn't have been possible without Paralympic sport. But also there's the whole other side of all these avenues that the doors immediately are closed when you look into sports that are available, because there isn't that many. when you look at winter sport, you have 5 or 6 sports, and you look at summer sports, there's a little more. I think there's probably 10, somewhere around there. But I guess that's kind of fueling the next part of my journey, is just trying to open up more avenues of sport. And it doesn't have to be in that high performance setting, but just allowing people to go outside and experience things in a way that they can be stoked about it, I think is the best way. Like for me, if someone presented someone like myself now, who's spending a lot more time in the backcountry, still snowmobiling, riding dirt bikes, riding mountain bikes, I probably would have been like, I want to do what he's doing. But there wasn't anybody doing that at the time. So now it's, just turning into a goal of mine to try and showcase all of these other avenues, that there is a process behind figuring it out, but there's potential to kind of just go out and do what you want to do. So there's two sides to that, I guess.
Yeah, for me, I guess before you're a high performance athlete, you need to pick a sport, and pick a sport you love. So growing up, having skied my whole life, it was something that I was just super passionate about, and it was only natural to go into high performance because it was the way that I could continue to push myself, continue to thrive in this sport that I was already so in love with. So I think that that's the most important thing, is to just find what you love, and it'll be easy to be good at it.
I would say don't worry about it as much. It's like things matter for sure, and you got to try really hard. But I think I stressed over a lot of things that would have been decisions that were made for me anyway. You're under the age of 18. You have your coaches and your parents who know best, and they're going to make a lot of those school related and athlete related things, and they're going to kind of help you figure it out and guide you, hopefully, if you have the right guidance. And I would say that have a little bit, have fun. Make sure that you're always enjoying skiing or your sport, right? Because going back to the work-life balance, eventually this is going to be a hobby for you. And it's not going to be your drive every single day to get up, and you're gonna wanna still enjoy it. I think I went through a period where I didn't, and I regret not liking skiing, and I'm glad that I'm back. And yeah, it's good. It doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Yeah, I think everybody on the panel, you're all good examples of that whole, being able to be successful in your sport, but still be successful outside of that sport as well. With your careers and with your social lives. Which is, I think, the most important thing they talked about in the session earlier about making sure it's a positive experience, when you're first introduced to that sport. And keeping it a positive experience. And that's the people around you that make it positive, make it incredible. And those are people like Gwen as well, who just make all these things happen.
Because I'm still having fun.
Because you're still having fun. Yeah, and you see the value in it, for everybody. So I guess that kind of concludes it. Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. I know you'll always be available online and socially for people if you want to follow up afterwards. If you have more questions or somebody, that the one thing I wanted to say about that last session, I didn't speak up, but your social network, the people and your family are so valuable. And this community, even though there's so many different sports, it's such a tight-knit community. And it's really word of mouth that grows the sport and brings new people in and keeps athletes in the sport. I can't thank those people enough, and for you to be those people to the athletes, be the ones that bring them in, be the ones that encourage them, be the ones to support them all the way through. Parasports have come a long way in the last 30 years, and it's great. I know it's only going to grow from here.
Thanks, Rich. I really appreciate that you took the time away from work and family to come and do this today, and thank the panelists for being here and sharing your stories. And it is very much appreciated. Thank you.